The prominent financial ratings agency, Moody's, downgraded Israel's economic and credit outlook, issuing an 8-page report warning that Netanyahu's policies risk undermining Israel's fundamental institutions, including an independent judiciary. Now, this, in turn, could rattle confidence in international companies, banking institutions, and investors, Moody's noted, potentially weakening Israel's economy in the future. While Israel will mark the 75th anniversary of its modern rebirth on May 14th on the Western calendar, on the Hebrew calendar, Israelis will celebrate our Independence Day next week. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has very little to celebrate right now. He's squarely on the defensive and searching for ways to regain the initiative. Good evening and welcome to the Rosenberg Report from Jerusalem, this beautiful, glorious capital city. Look, Netanyahu's political trials are our top story tonight. Unfortunately, we've had another terrorist attack this week, and this has rattled Israelis again. And you can go to All Israel News for all the latest details, but this is a serious problem, and Israelis are bracing for the potential of more. There have been funerals for those murdered by Palestinian radicals, and Israelis are grieving in the spate of recent violence and bracing themselves for more. For the 15th week in a row, hundreds of thousands of Israelis took to the streets over the weekend to protest Netanyahu's judicial reform bill again. And then, as All Israel News reported, the prominent financial ratings agency, Moody's, downgraded Israel's economic and credit outlook, issuing an 8-page report warning that Netanyahu's policies risk undermining Israel's fundamental institutions, including an independent judiciary. Now, this, in turn, could rattle confidence in international companies, banking institutions, and investors, Moody's noted, potentially weakening Israel's economy in the future. That said, Moody's did not actually downgrade Israel's A1 credit rating. That's good, noting that for the moment, Israel is experiencing strong economic growth and improving fiscal strength. Quote, "The Israeli economy has grown at a rapid rate over the past several years, averaging 4.1% over the decade to 2022, helped to an important extent by the globally competitive and increasingly diversified high-tech industries." All these developments combined have been a serious blow to Netanyahu's reputation as Mr. Security and Mr. Economy, and his poll numbers are plunging as a result. 71% of Israelis now disapprove of the job that Netanyahu is doing. Only 20% of Israelis say the prime minister is doing a good job. If elections were held today, Netanyahu's Likud party would no longer be the biggest party in the Knesset, and Netanyahu would no longer be able to form a coalition government based on the current party formations. Instead, former Defense Minister Benny Gantz and his center-right National Unity Party had surged into the lead in one poll after another, just as we recently reported on All Israel News. All of this combined with the fact that the Biden White House keeps criticizing Netanyahu's judicial reform plan and is urging him to not pursue it any longer is taking its toll. It's putting a significant strain on U.S.-Israeli relations and causing Israel's enemies to think that they can smell blood in the water. And that's why Netanyahu took the rare step of appearing on NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday in an attempt to reset the narrative and regain the initiative. Asked about the intense mounting opposition to his judicial reform plans, Netanyahu admitted it is not going the way he had planned, and he's trying to find a path to build broad national consensus.
The first thing is that I look for a broad consensus on the judiciary. Every democracy, including your own, has continuous tension between the judiciary and the executive or the legislative. That's happening in America. It's happening in France. It's happening in Israel. It's a natural tension of trying to keep the balance between the three branches of government. And Israel is no different. In Israel, the last 30 years has been a growing arrogation by the Supreme Court of the powers of the executive and the legislative. We're trying to bring it back into a proper balance. But that obviously has concerns because democracy is based on the will of the majority, the will of the people is reflected in the government that is elected and the legislature that is elected, and protecting individual rights, the will of the majority and the rights of the minority. And how to balance that is something that we're working at now. It's not easy. I want to make sure the pendulum doesn't swing from an all-powerful judiciary, always independent, but not always all-powerful, that overrules the government or the parliament. But at the same time, I don't want the parliament overruling automatically every decision of the Supreme Court. So I've decided to take time out, try to get a balance between the opposing views, and there are strongly opposing views in both sides of our society, and I hope to reach this by consensus. I think that's actually the right thing to do, and I'm doing it.
Host Chuck Todd then pressed Netanyahu on allegations that he's pursuing these reforms to benefit himself in his corruption trial.
But do you understand why perhaps your opponents in the country just don't take you at face value about the judicial reforms? Because you yourself would benefit from these reforms due to your corruption trial and the ability perhaps to make this either corruption trial totally go away or be delayed. How can you lead this effort if you yourself may benefit from this effort? How do you make it credible to the public?
Here's another fib, another lie. That's just not true. My own legal proceedings, which by the way are crumbling, all these charges against me have been crumbling. It's interesting that the hostile press stopped covering it, stopped covering the trial the minute it began, because things are just crumbling one after the other. But be that as it may, it's important to understand the judges in my case have already been chosen. I've made it absolutely abundantly clear that the reform will not affect any judge who today or tomorrow in the future has to deal with my case. So my case is completely independent from this.
Todd also pressed Netanyahu on whether U.S.-Israeli relations are being harmed by the way that he's handling his government.
President Biden has weighed in, concerned about the judicial reform. Do you believe this is impacting U.S.-Israeli relations?
No, I don't. I think President Biden has been a great friend of Israel. I've known him for 40 years, from the time he was a senator, through vice president, through president. I know his commitment to Israel's security. Friends can have disagreements on occasion, but I share with him the view that we should act. Not only share the view, I'm actually acting on it to try to reach a broad consensus as possible. I want to tell you one thing, Chuck.
Yes.
When I compare the degree of coordination between Israel and America on security matters, on intel, on cyber, economic cooperation,
yeah.
I mean, there's just no comparison to where this was 27 years ago. Today, I think Israel, I always say America is Israel's indispensable and by far the best ally. But I want to tell you, I don't think you have a better ally in the world than Israel, because Israel has become a great technological power and a great asset to the United States. And our cooperation, mutual cooperation, saves a lot of American and Israeli lives.
Netanyahu is certainly correct that U.S.-Israeli relations are strong, and they have weathered far worse than this. But no one can read the tea leaves, the political tea leaves, better than Netanyahu. And the very fact that he felt that he needed to appear on an American Sunday morning talk show to communicate not just to the American people, but almost more importantly right now to those in the White House and on Capitol Hill, indicates that he and his team are worried. Viewers of the Rosenberg Report know that I believe that judicial reform is vitally important to Israel's future. But I've been outspoken on this show and on All Israel News about my concerns about the way the current bill is written. And I believe that changes absolutely need to be made. And Netanyahu, I have to say, is doing the right thing. He's calling for a timeout in the legislative process. He's negotiating with opposition leaders to try to find a compromise language that will build broad national consensus. And he's making his case directly to the American people and their leaders that he will never allow Israel's robust and vibrant democracy to be emasculated, much less destroyed.
Hey, I'm Mati Shoshani, and thank you for watching the TBN Israel YouTube channel. We hope this video gave you greater understanding of Israel and her people. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. We'd love to hear from you, so be sure to share what you've learned and ask your questions in comments below. And invite your friends to join the conversation.